It was one of those days when summer reluctantly gave way to autumn, and the crispness in the air hinted at the changing season. I decided to visit an art exhibit in my hometown that afternoon. The venue was an elegant old mansion, now repurposed into a bustling art center. This grand building, generously donated to the city for cultural enrichment, featured towering windows that framed breathtaking views of Lake Michigan. The lake stretched endlessly, its vast waters restless under the gusty wind. Waves pounded against the jagged rocks along the shore, sending misty sprays skyward. The wind had churned the lake's usual tranquil blue into a stormy, dramatic gray. Lake Michigan always felt like a living entity to me, sometimes calm and inviting, but just as often mysterious, brooding, and capricious. As I wandered through the building, memories surfaced of a time I'd been next door, in another imposing mansion, celebrating my brother's wedding reception. That neighboring property had an intriguing past, having once been a girls' boarding school before its transformation into a historical site and event venue. The original mansion had belonged to a wealthy tycoon, but when it became a school in 1865, they added a chapel and living quarters for the students and nuns who served as their teachers. The place had layers of history, each adding to its mystique. Over the years, it had acquired a reputation for being haunted. Around Halloween, it even doubled as a haunted house. The building's shadowy, Gothic design, combined with whispered tales of ghostly sightings, made it the perfect spot for spooky thrills. Visitors swore they saw faces staring out of the windows, shadowy figures lurking in corners, and heard eerie footsteps echoing through empty halls. Of course, like many ghost stories, these tales were a mix of fact and local folklore, stitched together to entertain and terrify. I remember nervously glancing around the reception, half hoping and half dreading to encounter a ghost. Unsurprisingly, nothing paranormal happened. Spirits, if they were real, weren't likely to interrupt a joyous, bustling wedding party. No doubt, they preferred the stillness of night to make their presence known. The school itself had catered to daughters of affluent families from Chicago's posh northern suburbs. Many of the girls were sent there for what their parents deemed troubling behavior, flirting with unsuitable boys, being too rebellious, or showing too much independence. These minor transgressions, alarming to their high society parents, led to the girls being packed off to the school, where strict discipline and religious instruction were supposed to set them straight. One such girl, Olivia Brown, had been sent away for falling in love with her family's stable hand. He was a rugged, broad-shouldered young man with a commanding presence, and Olivia couldn't resist his charm. On their family's sprawling estate in Lake Forest, they'd met during her horseback rides, and their secret romance quickly blossomed. They would steal away together, galloping on their favorite horses to secluded spots where they could be alone. When her parents discovered the affair, they were horrified and wasted no time making arrangements to separate the two. Olivia was swiftly dispatched to the boarding school. Olivia fought the decision every step of the way, but her protests fell on deaf ears. Her parents refused to tell her where she was being sent, only that she had to leave, and immediately. It felt to her as though they were banishing her to the ends of the earth. On her first day, she arrived by horse-drawn carriage, her heart heavy with dread. She reluctantly stepped out and trudged along the cobblestone path leading to the school. Each step toward the looming gray building felt like walking into a nightmare. Its Gothic towers and sprawling wings seemed to leer down at her, as if claiming her. "There's no way out," the building seemed to whisper. A nun, cloaked in flowing black robes, descended the stone steps to greet her. "Welcome," the woman said in a clipped, emotionless voice. "I am Sister Margaret Agnes. May God's grace guide you here. You must be Olivia." Olivia's mother stepped forward briskly. "Yes, this is Olivia. I trust you've received our letter. She's a willful girl and needs close supervision. We want to ensure she stays far away from bad influences." Sister Margaret Agnes gave a sharp nod. "You can count on me. I'll personally see to it that she understands the importance of humility and obedience." Olivia shivered as the nun spoke. Despite her small stature, the woman had an imposing presence. Her dark robes reminded Olivia of a crow circling above, waiting to swoop down. The nun continued, "We will help Olivia understand that life is not about selfish desires. She must learn to serve others and abandon all sinful, frivolous behavior." Olivia cast her eyes downward, a lump forming in her throat. She couldn't fathom how falling in love had made her a sinner. All she'd done was ride her horse and share a kiss with someone who truly cared for her. Was that really so wrong? Her father cleared his throat awkwardly. "Yes, well, we'll miss her," he muttered, clearly unsettled by the severity of Sister Margaret Agnes. "But we've heard excellent things about your school's reputation." As Olivia glanced at her parents one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was no longer her own. Sister Margaret Agnes's lips curled into a sly, bitter smile. Something about this girl stirred long-buried memories from a time before she took her vows. Olivia had the kind of beauty that once haunted Margaret Agnes in her youth, a tall, graceful blonde with delicate features that seemed to attract men effortlessly. The kind of girl who had stolen what Margaret Agnes once held most dear, Jacob, the man she had dreamed of marrying. Jacob had left her for another woman, a captivating beauty named Hannah, whose striking resemblance to Olivia was almost uncanny. That betrayal had shattered her world and permanently altered the course of her life. After Jacob chose Hannah, Margaret Agnes saw no point in seeking love again. Plain and unremarkable in appearance, she knew her options had always been limited, but Jacob's rejection was the final blow. Heartbroken, she turned her back on her old life, finding refuge and purpose in the church. Becoming a nun seemed like a way to escape the pain, but it didn't heal the bitterness in her heart. Instead, it grew. Every time she saw a girl like Olivia, she saw Hannah, and she made it her mission to punish them. The parents who sent their daughters to her gave her all the authority she needed. Spare the rod and spoil the child, after all. Olivia was just another Hannah to her, and Margaret Agnes could hardly wait to begin her cruel lessons. The morning after Olivia's parents departed, leaving her alone in the suffocating confines of the school, the young girl sat on her bed, grappling with feelings of loss and anger. She refused to let despair win. Straightening her posture, she resolved to find a way out. Spotting her roommate, a freckled redhead named Sarah, Olivia decided to take a chance. "Hi, I'm Olivia," she said, forcing a smile. "I just got here. What can you tell me about this place? The teachers? Anything I should know?" Sarah looked surprised by the sudden approach but offered a shy smile in return. "Nice to meet you," Sarah said hesitantly. "I hope you're not expecting much. This place isn't exactly a vacation spot." Her smile quickly faded, replaced by a nervous expression. "I don't know what got you sent here, but this school is for punishment. The nuns already see you as a sinner, and they'll make sure you pay for it." "What are you talking about?" Olivia asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What kind of punishment?" Sarah sighed. "They've got their ways. Rulers across your hands, isolation, chores for hours. Sister Margaret Agnes is the worst of them all. She's always on me for my hair. Says it's a sign of the devil." Olivia's stomach turned. "That's awful. When I met her, she gave me this creepy vibe. I'm definitely staying out of her way." "Good luck with that," Sarah replied grimly. It didn't take long for Sarah's warning to come true. The very next day, as the two sat side by side in English class, Sister Margaret Agnes strode into the room like a storm brewing over the horizon. Her sharp eyes scanned the rows of students until they landed squarely on Olivia. "Miss Montgomery," she called in a tone that made Olivia's chest tighten. "Yes, sister." Olivia responded, her voice small but steady. "Do you know the school's dress code?" "Yes, ma'am," Olivia answered. "I'm wearing the uniform my parents purchased, exactly what was required." The nun's icy gaze lingered on her. "Stand up and come to the front of the room," she ordered. Heart pounding, Olivia rose from her seat. The other girls stared at her as she walked to the front, her cheeks burning under their scrutiny. "Kneel," Sister Margaret Agnes said curtly. "Your skirt must touch the ground. Let's see if you meet the standard." Olivia obeyed, kneeling as instructed. To her horror, she noticed that her skirt ended a couple of inches above the floor. It wasn't intentional, her height made it nearly impossible for the skirt to fit properly. "Just as I thought," the nun declared with a triumphant sneer. "Stand up." Olivia stood, dreading what would come next. Margaret Agnes walked to a barrel in the corner and scooped out handfuls of uncooked white rice, scattering it on the floor in a deliberate motion. "Kneel there," she commanded, pointing at the scattered grains. "On the rice?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "On the rice," the nun repeated coldly. "You will remain there for the duration of the class to reflect on your immodesty. Showing your legs like that is an act of wantonness, a failure to protect what should remain pure and private." Swallowing her humiliation, Olivia knelt on the rice. The sharp grains dug into her knees through her stockings, sending waves of pain through her legs. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of the nun. The hour dragged on, each minute more excruciating than the last. Olivia's stockings tore under the pressure, and her knees felt raw against the unyielding grains. Yet she held her head high, refusing to let Sister Margaret Agnes see her break. By the time the class ended, Olivia's pain had deepened, but so had her resolve. If Sister Margaret Agnes thought she could crush her spirit, she was sorely mistaken. In the weeks that followed, Olivia came to realize that her initial punishment was just the tip of the iceberg. Sister Margaret Agnes seemed to take sadistic pleasure in tormenting her. The punishments were relentless and cruel, sharp strikes of the ruler on her already bruised and bloodied knuckles, the excruciating rice kneeling, or having her face shoved into a chalk circle drawn on the board until she coughed and wheezed from the chalk dust clogging her throat and lungs. Each day brought fresh torment. But the worst punishment came on a particularly humiliating day when Olivia was forced to remove her blouse and endure a whipping in front of the entire class. Her so-called offense? Asking for permission to use the restroom. The nun, enraged by what she deemed an interruption, declared that Olivia needed to master control over her bodily urges. Pain, she claimed, was a holy teacher. It would cleanse her, sanctify her, and instill the discipline required to remain pure. Whatever respect Olivia might have once held for authority evaporated. Hatred replaced it. And she wasn't alone. Sarah, her fiery-haired roommate, was also a frequent target. Sister Margaret Agnes seemed particularly fixated on Sarah's red hair, which she repeatedly called the mark of the devil. On one especially cruel occasion, the nun had cut off all of Sarah's long, beautiful hair, leaving her looking like a plucked, frightened bird. Another girl, Emma, suffered similarly. Mature for her age, Emma had a naturally curvy figure that the nun deemed a sinful body. Margaret Agnes claimed that such a form was the devil's design, meant to tempt men, and that it needed to be beaten into submission. Like the others, Emma endured lashes and humiliations that left scars far deeper than the physical. The three girls, united by their shared suffering, formed an unbreakable bond. Together, they began to plot their revenge. Sarah was the first to notice the nun's nightly routine. Sister Margaret Agnes often climbed the curving staircase to the school's observatory around 8 p.m. The oval-shaped tower provided panoramic views of Lake Michigan and the surrounding property, perfect for both brooding over the turbulent waters and ensuring no students were sneaking about after curfew. To reach it, she had to navigate a steep staircase with several landings. Sarah hatched the plan. Each girl would position herself on a landing. When Sister Margaret Agnes descended, they would take turns shoving her down the stairs, giving her a clear message: leave us alone, or suffer the consequences. Olivia felt conflicted. Part of her conscience whispered that hurting another person was wrong, no matter what. But the memory of the nun's endless cruelty silenced those doubts. If anyone deserved punishment, it was Sister Margaret Agnes. The night came swiftly. Shortly after 8, the nun ascended the staircase, lantern in hand, her heavy robes trailing behind her. The girls, dressed in soft bedroom slippers, crept silently up after her, positioning themselves in the darkness. Olivia chose the topmost landing. She wanted the first move. After all, Sister Margaret Agnes's cruelty had hit her the hardest. For nearly an hour, the girls waited, listening to the muffled creak of the observatory door and the soft wind whistling through the tower. At last, the door opened. Sister Margaret Agnes stepped out, her lantern casting faint shadows on the dimly lit staircase. The girls held their breath, pressing themselves into the walls to remain unseen. The nun began her descent. Each creak of the wooden stairs echoed like a heartbeat. As she reached the first landing, where Olivia stood, the girl's anger boiled over. Years of suppressed fury fueled her as she gave a powerful shove to the nun's thin shoulders. The old woman cried out, stumbling and twisting her ankle as she landed awkwardly on the next landing. Before the nun could regain her balance, Sarah moved in. Without hesitation, she delivered another push, sending Sister Margaret Agnes crashing down the next set of steps. This time, the nun fell face first, her lantern shattering as it hit the floor. Now it was Sarah's turn. Standing on the final landing, she thought of all the shame, the humiliation, and the constant reminders that her body was sinful simply for existing. Every lash, every insult, every degrading moment came rushing back. She summoned all her rage and delivered the final shove. Sister Margaret Agnes's body hurtled down the last flight of stairs, landing with a sickening thud at the bottom. Silence engulfed the staircase. For a moment, the girls stood frozen, staring at the crumpled figure below. The nun didn't move. She didn't breathe. The deed was done. Outside, the waves pounded the shore with fury, as though Lake Michigan itself mourned the dark events of the night. Inside, the air was thick with an eerie stillness. The girls slipped away, their hearts racing, leaving the black-robed figure lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs. Sister Margaret Agnes never tormented anyone again. But her story didn't end there. They say her spirit still lingers, haunting the school's hallways and staircases, forever caught between worlds. On stormy nights, when the lake is restless and the wind howls through the tower, some claim to have seen her shadowy figure lurking in the observatory, her cold eyes searching for those who wronged her. The Lady of the Lake waits, seeking her due.